Marcus Kane adjusted his grip on the plasma rifle, the familiar weight doing little to calm his nerves. The corridors of the obsidian palace stretched endlessly before him, their walls seeming to pulse with an inner light that made his human eyes water. 3 years of serving in the Galactic Protection Corps hadn't prepared him for this assignment, personal security for Queen Zelania of the Crystalline Empire during the most delicate peace negotiations in centuries. "You seem uncomfortable, human," observed Minister Valdris, the lanky alien diplomat walking beside him. His pale green skin had an opalescent quality that shifted colors as they moved through the bioluminescent hallways. The Queen specifically requested a human guard. "Your species has quite the reputation for adaptability." Marcus kept his expression neutral, though inwardly he bristled. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Council 5 years ago, after the devastating sector wars had proven that even the youngest species could hold their own against ancient civilizations. The scars on his left arm, hidden beneath his ceremonial armor, were a permanent reminder of those battles. "Just focused on the job, Minister," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the circumstances. At 32, he'd seen enough action to know when something felt wrong, and everything about this assignment screamed danger. The massive doors to the throne chamber began to part with a sound like singing crystal. Marcus's breath caught as the space beyond was revealed. The chamber was impossibly vast, with flowing walls that seemed to be carved from a single massive geode. Pillars of pure crystal rose to support a ceiling that captured and refracted light into dancing rainbows. But none of that architectural wonder mattered once his eyes found the figure seated upon the throne. Queen Zelania was unlike anything he'd ever imagined. Her skin held the soft luminescence of moonlight on water, pale blue-white with veins of silver that traced delicate patterns along her exposed arms and collarbone. Her hair was the deep purple-black of space itself, flowing around her shoulders like liquid shadow. She wore robes of midnight blue that seemed to contain actual stars, tiny points of light that twinkled as she moved. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, large, expressive, and the color of distant nebulae, shifting between violet and gold. "Minister Valdris," her voice carried the musical quality of wind chimes, "and you must be the human guardian I requested." Marcus executed a perfect military bow, fighting to keep his professional composure intact. "Marcus Kane, Your Majesty. At your service." Those ethereal eyes studied him with obvious curiosity. "I have heard fascinating stories about your kind. They say humans possess an unusual capacity for sacrifice." Before Marcus could respond, his enhanced peripheral vision caught a shimmer of movement in the upper galleries. Training kicked in instantly, the slight displacement of air, the way the light bent just wrong in one spot. Active camouflage. Assassin. Down. Marcus roared, launching himself forward without thought. His body collided with the Queen's just as a beam of superheated plasma tore through the space where she'd been sitting. The throne behind them exploded in a shower of crystal fragments, the sound like 1,000 bells shattering at once. Marcus rolled, coming up with his rifle already tracking the distortion. His finger squeezed the trigger twice, the first shot disrupted the cloaking field, the second found its mark. A figure in matte black armor tumbled from the gallery, orange blood pooling on the pristine floor. The chamber erupted into chaos as guards poured in from every entrance, their energy weapons charging with an ominous hum. Marcus kept his position, shielding the Queen with his body, his rifle still raised as he scanned for additional threats. "Stand down," Queen Zelania's voice cut through the pandemonium like a blade. She rose gracefully from where Marcus had tackled her, her starlight robes somehow unmarred despite their violent tumble. "All of you, stand down." The guards hesitated, clearly torn between training and their monarch's command. Marcus slowly lowered his weapon but remained alert, positioned between the Queen and any potential threat. "You saved my life," Zelania said, her eyes meeting his. There was something in that gaze, surprise, gratitude, and something else he couldn't quite identify. "By the ancient laws of my people, this deed must be rewarded. Name your wish, Marcus Kane. Anything within my power to grant." A murmur rippled through the assembled court. Marcus could feel the weight of tradition settling over the chamber like a heavy cloak. He knew enough about alien customs to understand that this wasn't just ceremony, it was binding law. "Your Majesty," he began, then stopped. Something in her eyes, a flicker of loneliness that he recognized all too well, made him reconsider his careful diplomatic response. Power isolated people, he'd learned that in his years protecting high-value targets. The higher they climbed, the more alone they became. Maybe it was the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Maybe it was the way the starlight in her robe seemed to dance in response to her heartbeat. Or maybe it was just that human instinct to reach for the impossible that had carried his species from a single world to the stars. "I wish," he said clearly, his voice carrying through the silent chamber, "to know you. Not the queen, but the woman behind the crown. I wish for the chance to be close to you." The silence that followed was absolute. Queen Zelania's luminescent skin shifted through several colors, surprise registering as bright silver, confusion as pale gold, and finally something that might have been a blush, a soft rose that spread from her cheeks down her neck. "You." She began, then stopped, clearly struggling with something. "You understand what you're asking?" "I'm asking for a chance," Marcus replied simply. Nothing more, nothing less. The queen's eyes searched his face, looking for deception, for hidden motives. When she found none, her expression shifted to something between wonder and disbelief. "Very well," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your wish is granted, Marcus Kane. Though I suspect neither of us truly understands what we've just agreed to." As the guards led him away to prepare quarters befitting his new status, Marcus caught one last glimpse of Queen Zelania. She stood alone in her ruined throne room, surrounded by crystal fragments that caught the light like fallen stars, her hand pressed to her heart as if trying to calm its racing rhythm. He had no idea what he'd just set in motion, but for the first time in years, Marcus Kane felt truly alive. The guest quarters assigned to Marcus were more luxurious than anything he'd experienced in his life. Walls of translucent crystal filtered the natural light into soft, ever-changing hues, while furniture that seemed grown rather than built adjusted to his human physiology with uncanny precision. Yet despite the alien opulence surrounding him, Marcus found himself pacing like a caged animal. 3 days had passed since the assassination attempt, and he'd seen Queen Zelania only in formal settings, state dinners where she sat impossibly distant at the head of a table that seemed to stretch for miles, council meetings where she spoke in the musical diplomatic language he was still learning to understand. Each time their eyes met across those formal spaces, he felt an electric current of connection, quickly severed by protocol and watchful courtiers. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door dissolved into motes of light, revealing Jackson Reed, Marcus's oldest friend and fellow human in the Galactic Protection Corps. Where Marcus was lean and intense, Jackson was broad-shouldered and easygoing, with laugh lines around his green eyes and sandy hair that refused to stay regulation short despite his best efforts. "Well, well," Jackson said, stepping inside with his characteristic grin, "look who's living like galactic royalty." "Nice digs, Kane." "Jax." Marcus clasped his friend's shoulder, genuinely glad to see a familiar face. "What brings you to this corner of the galaxy?" "Official business, security review for the Peace Summit next week." "Unofficial business, checking on my best friend who apparently decided to court an alien queen." Jackson's grin widened. "The whole human diplomatic corps is buzzing about it. Some are calling you either the boldest romantic in the galaxy or completely insane." "The jury's still out on which," Marcus admitted, running a hand through his dark hair. "I haven't had a real conversation with her since I made the wish. There's always someone watching, someone listening. It's like trying to connect through a wall of protocol." Jackson studied his friend's face, noting the frustration and something deeper, longing. "You really care about her, don't you? This isn't just about the challenge or the exotic appeal." "It's not like that," Marcus said quietly. "There's something about her, Jax. In those brief moments when the mask slips, when she thinks no one's watching, she's lonely. Incredibly lonely. And brilliant, and funny, Anne. And completely off-limits according to half the court, interrupted a new voice. Both humans turned to see Lady Seraphina standing in the doorway, having entered with the silent grace characteristic of her people. The Queen's chief advisor was tall and elegant, her skin a pale lavender shade that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her hair was silver white, worn in an intricate style that spoke of ancient nobility, and her eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray with flashes of electric blue. Lady Seraphina, Marcus said carefully, offering a respectful nod. I wasn't expecting. Of course you weren't. Humans rarely think beyond the immediate consequences of their actions. Her voice carried the crisp precision of someone accustomed to absolute authority. May I enter? Marcus gestured her inside, noting how Jackson automatically shifted into a more defensive posture. Years of combat training had taught them both to recognize potential threats, and Lady Seraphina radiated the kind of controlled danger that came from centuries of political maneuvering. I assume you're here to tell me to stay away from the Queen, Marcus said bluntly. On the contrary, Seraphina replied, settling onto one of the adaptive chairs with fluid grace. I'm here to inform you that your wish has created a situation far more complex than your limited understanding of our culture could have anticipated. Jackson stepped forward slightly. With respect, Lady Seraphina, Marcus acted to save Queen Zelania's life. If there are political complications. Political complications? Seraphina's laugh was like breaking glass. Young human, you have no idea. The wish Marcus made wasn't just for companionship. By requesting to know the Queen and be close to her, he inadvertently invoked one of our oldest courtship protocols. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Courtship protocols. Among my people, when someone saves the life of the monarch and requests intimacy, which is how your words were interpreted, it begins a formal courtship process. One that hasn't been invoked in over 3 centuries. Seraphina's storm-gray eyes fixed on Marcus. You have essentially asked to be considered as a potential consort to the Queen. The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson whistled low under his breath, while Marcus struggled to process the implications. I didn't know, Marcus said finally. I never intended. Your intentions matter less than the reality of the situation, Seraphina interrupted. The Queen is bound by law to consider your suit properly. This means you will be granted private audiences, opportunities to demonstrate your worthiness, and, if the courtship progresses, eventual integration into the royal household. And if it doesn't progress? Jackson asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. If the Queen finds Marcus unworthy, or if he proves unable to adapt to our ways, the courtship will be formally terminated. He'll be granted a generous settlement and safe passage back to human space. Seraphina's expression grew cold. However, if he withdraws from the courtship without the Queen's permission, or if he dishonors her in any way, the consequences would be severe. Marcus met her gaze steadily. And what do you think I should do? I think, Seraphina said, rising gracefully from her chair, that you should understand what you're truly choosing. Queen Zelania is not just a beautiful alien woman to be conquered by human charm. She is the absolute ruler of an empire that spans 37 star systems. She has responsibilities that would crush a lesser being, enemies who would destroy entire worlds to see her fall, and a loneliness so profound that it has shaped every decision she's made for the past 50 years. 50 years? Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. But she looks young by your standards, I know. We age differently than humans. Zelania is 137 years old, and she has been queen for nearly a century. She has watched friends grow old and die, seen lovers choose power over love, and learned that ruling means sacrificing personal happiness for the good of billions. Seraphina moved toward the door, then paused. The question is not whether you can charm her, Marcus came. The question is whether you can love someone whose heart has been frozen by a century of isolation and betrayal. After she left, Jackson let out a long breath. Well, that was ominous. Are you sure about this, Marcus? Because it sounds like you're in way over your head. Marcus walked to the crystal wall, looking out at the alien city that sprawled below the palace. Beings of a dozen different species moved through streets that seemed to flow like rivers of light, going about their lives under the rule of a queen who couldn't share their simple freedoms. I keep thinking about her eyes, he said quietly. In that moment after I saved her, before all the protocol and ceremony kicked in, I saw something there. Recognition, maybe. Like she saw something in me that she'd been looking for. Or like she saw someone who might actually see her as more than just a crown and a throne, Jackson suggested gently. Yeah. Maybe. Marcus turned back to his friend. I know it's crazy, Jax. I know the odds are impossible. But I can't shake the feeling that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Jackson clapped him on the shoulder. Then I guess we'd better make sure you don't screw it up. Because if Lady Seraphina is right about the consequences of failure, you're going to need all the help you can get. As if summoned by their conversation, another chime announced a new visitor. This time, the door revealed a young palace servant, her skin a soft golden hue and her manner nervous. Marcus Kane, she asked in accented standard. Her Majesty requests your presence in the private gardens. She wishes to speak with you alone. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. After 3 days of formal distance, Zelania was finally ready to have the conversation they'd both been avoiding. Tell Her Majesty I'll be there immediately, he said, already moving toward the door. Marcus, Jackson called after him. Remember what Seraphina said. This isn't just about charm or attraction. This is about seeing past a century of walls. Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of what lay ahead. Somewhere in the palace gardens, Queen Zelania was waiting for him, not as subjects and ruler, but as two beings trying to bridge the vast gulf between their worlds. The real courtship was about to begin. The private gardens of the Obsidian Palace were a wonder that defied description. Bioluminescent flowers bloomed in impossible colors, their petals seeming to contain entire galaxies within their depths. Streams of liquid light flowed through carefully sculpted channels, creating a symphony of soft chimes as they cascaded over crystalline rocks. The air itself shimmered with microscopic organisms that responded to emotion, creating gentle auroras that danced overhead. Marcus found Queen Zelania standing beside a pool that reflected not the sky above, but the depths of space itself. She had changed from her formal robes into something simpler, a flowing gown of deep blue that seemed to merge with the twilight around them. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked young. Your Majesty, he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, and he saw a vulnerability in her nebula-colored eyes that took his breath away. Please, she said, her musical voice barely above a whisper, when we're alone, call me Zelania. I hear, Your Majesty 1,000 times a day. I would like to remember what it sounds like to hear my name. Zelania, he repeated, and watched her luminescent skin brighten slightly at the sound. Thank you for agreeing to see me. I know this situation is complicated. A soft laugh escaped her. Complicated. Yes, that's one way to describe accidentally proposing marriage to someone you've known for less than a week. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Lady Seraphina explained the courtship protocols. I had no idea when I made the wish. I know, Zelania interrupted gently. Your ignorance of our customs is hardly surprising. But Marcus. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the silver patterns in her skin pulse with her heartbeat. The question isn't whether you knew what you were asking. The question is whether you meant it. Before Marcus could answer, a new voice cut through the garden's tranquil atmosphere. Sister, what is the meaning of this? Both turned to see a tall figure approaching through the luminescent foliage. Prince Darian shared his sister's ethereal beauty, but where Zelania's presence was warm starlight, his was cold and sharp as a blade. His skin held the same luminescent quality, but in pale gold rather than blue-white, and his hair was the silver of moonlight on metal. His eyes, the color of winter storms, fixed on Marcus with undisguised hostility. "Darian," Zelania's voice carried a warning. "I wasn't expecting you back from the outer colonies so soon." "Fortunately," the prince replied, his gaze never leaving Marcus. "It seems my sister has need of family counsel." I returned to find the palace buzzing with gossip about this human, who has somehow maneuvered himself into a courtship. Marcus stepped forward, his military training kicking in. "Prince Darian, I assure you." "You assure me?" Darian's laugh was sharp as breaking ice. "Human, do you have any conception of what you're interfering with? My sister is not some conquest to be won. She is the beating heart of an empire, the guardian of billions of lives across dozens of worlds." "I'm aware of her responsibilities," Marcus replied evenly, though he could feel his temper rising. "I'm also aware that she's a person, not just a symbol." The prince's eyes flashed dangerously. "A person?" "She ceased being merely a person the day she took the crown. Every breath she draws, every decision she makes, affects the fate of civilizations. She cannot afford the luxury of personal desires." "Darian, enough." Zelania's voice carried the unmistakable authority of a queen, though Marcus caught the pain beneath it. "My personal life is not subject to your approval." "Your personal life affects the stability of the realm," Darian shot back. "Do you think our enemies won't use this association against us? A human consort to the crystalline throne? The political ramifications alone are my concern to manage," Zelania finished firmly. "As they have been for the past century." Marcus watched the exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't just about xenophobia or political concerns, this was about a brother who had watched his sister sacrifice her happiness for duty for so long that he couldn't imagine any other way. "Prince Darian," Marcus said quietly, "may I ask you something?" The prince turned his cold gaze back to Marcus. "Speak. When was the last time you saw your sister truly happy?" The question hung in the air between them. Darian's expression shifted, a flicker of something, pain, perhaps, or regret, crossing his features before the mask of royal composure slipped back into place. "Happiness is a luxury we cannot afford," he said finally. "No," Marcus replied, his voice gaining strength. "Happiness is what makes the sacrifice meaningful. What's the point of protecting billions of lives if those lives can't include joy, love, connection? If the price of peace is emotional isolation, then what kind of peace is it really?" Before Darian could respond, another figure emerged from the garden paths. Ambassador Helena Cross, the human diplomatic representative, approached with the measured stride of someone accustomed to defusing tense situations. She was a woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked auburn hair and intelligent brown eyes that missed nothing. "Your Majesty, Prince Darian," she said with practiced diplomacy, offering precise bows to each. "Marcus. I hope I'm not interrupting anything crucial." "Ambassador Cross," Zelania replied, her formal mask sliding back into place. "What brings you to the gardens at this hour?" "Urgent communications from both the Human Council and the Galactic Senate," Helena replied, her expression grave. "Word of the courtship has spread faster than we anticipated. There are concerns being raised on multiple fronts." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of concerns?" Helena glanced at Zelania, who nodded permission to speak freely. 3 separatist movements in the outer systems are using the courtship as evidence that the Queen has been compromised by human influence. Meanwhile, hardline factions in the Human Council are claiming this is an attempt to place a human in a position of power over alien worlds. "Both accusations are absurd," Darian said, though his tone suggested the political implications were exactly what he'd feared. "Absurd, yes, but effective," Helena replied. "There's also been increased military activity in the disputed sectors. Someone is using the controversy as cover for more aggressive actions." The weight of galactic politics settled over the garden like a heavy shroud. Marcus could see the familiar mask of duty sliding over Zelania's features, the warm, vulnerable woman disappearing behind the requirements of her crown. Perhaps, Zelania said carefully, it would be best if we formally announced the termination of the courtship. For the good of. No, Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying a conviction that surprised even him. Don't you dare. All eyes turned to him. Even the bioluminescent flowers seemed to dim in response to the sudden tension. Marcus, Helena warned, you need to consider the bigger picture. I am considering it, he said, his gaze fixed on Zelania. I'm considering a galaxy where the most powerful woman in known space can't choose her own happiness because politicians and separatists might use it as an excuse for violence they were planning anyway. I'm considering a universe where love becomes impossible because someone, somewhere, might find it inconvenient. He stepped closer to Zelania, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from Prince Darien. You asked me if I meant it when I made my wish, Marcus continued, his voice soft but carrying clearly in the crystalline air. The answer is yes. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Not because I want to conquer a queen or gain political power, but because I see who you are beneath the crown. I see the woman who worries about her people's happiness while denying her own. I see someone who has carried the weight of worlds for so long that she's forgotten she deserves to be loved for herself, not her throne. Zelania's luminescent skin was cycling through a rapid sequence of colors, surprise, fear, hope, and something that might have been wonder. Marcus, the risks are worth taking, he finished. Some things are worth fighting for, Zelania. Some connections are worth the chaos they cause. If we abandon this because it's politically inconvenient, what message does that send? That love bows to fear. That connection surrenders to convenience. The garden fell silent except for the gentle chiming of the light streams. Then, slowly, Zelania smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Marcus had seen from her. You realize, she said, her voice carrying a hint of her musical laugh, that you're asking me to potentially destabilize half the galaxy for the chance at personal happiness? Marcus grinned back at her. When you put it that way, it sounds like the most human thing possible. Prince Darien made a sound that might have been disgust or admiration. Sister, if you proceed with this madness, you'll have enemies on every side. Then it's fortunate, Zelania replied, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face, that I'll also have someone willing to stand beside me against them. Ambassador Helena sighed deeply. I suppose I should start drafting statements for the press. This is going to require some very creative diplomacy. As the others began discussing the political complexities ahead, Marcus and Zelania found themselves standing closer together, the space between them charged with possibility and promise. Are you sure about this? She whispered, her voice meant for him alone. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, he replied, and meant every word. Above them, the emotion-responsive organisms in the air began to glow brighter, painting the garden in shades of gold and rose, the colors, Marcus would later learn, that his people associated with the beginning of love. The real battle for their hearts was just beginning, but for the first time since arriving at the palace, Marcus felt like they might actually have a chance to win it.